So today we're going to be talking about home buying mistakes. Buying a home is the largest purchase you'll probably ever make in your life, so you'll want to listen in to know what mistakes to avoid. This is Jessica Duncan's Just My Opinion, and I'm Jessica. There's no handbook to owning a home. That's why I go beyond the transaction to share my opinion for adulting made simple. I'm so glad you're joining us today as we talk about home buying mistakes. So your home purchase is probably one of the largest purchases you will ever make in your lifetime. Whether it's your first house or your last house, it's probably one of the biggest purchases. So if you can avoid mistakes in your largest investment of your life, why not avoid them? So we're going to give you some tips today and talk about them. One of the biggest ones that I see is getting a pre-approval. So people think, well, I know I qualify, I got great credit, but there's so many other reasons to have a pre-approval and get a good local lender to give you a pre-approval. So why does it matter to use a local lender? There's tons of online lenders. You can just go online and have a pre-approval, sometimes in as little as 30 minutes. The problem is those lenders don't have local ties to the community. They don't worry about if it's a good pre-approval or not. They don't have to face us at the ballpark or at real estate events or at the grocery store. And so sometimes the value of those pre-approvals aren't worth the paper they're printed on. And you don't want to get your heart set on a property and spend all this money on it only to find out you're not pre-approved. So I'll give you a story, an example of when this happened, and it was absolutely devastating. So I had some clients of mine, young clients buying their first house. They had their first baby on the way. The baby was going to be coming 2 weeks after closing, so nothing like cutting it tight. They had a pre-approval from a large banking company, let's say, but one of those very large ones that you are on the other end of a 1-800 number, right? Not walking in and talking to someone or really having a personal relationship. They thought they were good to go. We move forward. We find the house. They paid for a home inspection, a termite inspection, a survey, which it was a large piece of land. So this survey was not cheap, as well as they paid for an appraisal, only to find out about a week before closing. And remember, they got a baby coming in 2 weeks after closing. So this is 3 weeks before their baby is going to be arriving, that they didn't qualify to buy the house. How devastating this was. Apparently, the person who did their pre-approval made a mistake and they actually didn't qualify. And they had spent a couple $1,000s on this property that they can't recoup. So it's a big reason to get a pre-approval. You want to make sure before you spend any money that you know you're going to be good. Another reason why I like for people to get a pre-approval is because they may actually qualify for more than they're comfortable with. They could qualify for double what they're comfortable with on their monthly payment. And part of that pre-approval should be discussing what your payment is going to be. And that way you know whether or not you're comfortable making that. You don't want to go fall in love with this gorgeous house only to get payment shock when you're like, wow, that's double what I thought it was going to be. And you know what? You may have been okay starting out at a lower price to begin with, but now that you've already fallen in love with that house, you're probably not going to want to. And you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're uncomfortable with your payments. Another example of a customer who recently had an issue with this is they had great credit, great cash flow, never had any problems buying anything in their life, a very well-established family, doctor, all that kind of situation. You would not think that they were going to have an issue. Well, recently they had moved towards more of a retirement stage of life. And this particular doctor started working more like a traveling doctor. Well, he didn't realize that that then made him 1099 or self-employed. And he had to be on the job 2 years before we can count that income. And not just on the job, he had to file tax returns for 2 years before that lender could count that income. How awful of an experience was that for him when they've never had a problem financing anything in their life? So it's not always just about how's my credit or do I qualify? There's a lot more that goes into it. So make sure you get a pre-approval. Another big mistake that you want to avoid is trying to go at it alone. A real estate agent is worth their weight in gold if they're a good real estate agent, but it's important to find the one that's going to work best for you. You want to interview several agents and figure out which one's going to communicate with you, what all services they offer, what differentiates them, and maybe even look at their reviews or even talk to some of their previous customers to see how they felt working with them. It's really important that you pick someone that's going to work well with you and you feel like is going to guide you in the right direction. So you don't want to go at it alone. Even if you've bought multiple houses, things change. Like right here in Florida, insurance is very different than it was a couple years ago. You want someone who's in it day in, day out and can guide you through those steps to make sure you're not wasting money along the way or have issues come up unexpectedly. So I said don't go at it alone, but let's talk about those bystanders who really aren't involved in the transaction. Be wary of them. So a lot of times I'm working with couples or even an individual and they have a family member who wants to advise them. Whether it's a parent or grandparent or brother or sister, be careful of that advice. So the problem that I see is when they're giving them advice, but they don't see what is going on in every single conversation. They haven't looked at all the houses. They haven't bought a house in a couple years. They don't understand what's going on with insurance. So don't go at it alone without a real estate agent, but be cautious if you're bringing family members or other people in to guide you. Now, I do think they can guide you very well, and they just want to protect you. Their intentions are always great. But if you're going to bring them in, I say bring them in from the beginning. So I know it sounds weird, but when I have someone buying our house, like right now, I have a young lady that's under contract on our first house that it's actually being built. So she hasn't quite closed on it, but her mom was going to be a big influence in this conversation. So I said from the beginning, let's just get her involved. I want her to come to all of our meetings, come to our strategy meeting, go look at all the houses with us. That way she gets all the information and can help guide her versus if she just comes home and says one brief thing and the mom's like, wait a minute, that didn't sound right. Well, she hasn't seen all the houses. She hasn't heard all the conversations, so it may not sound right. I'd rather her be involved from the beginning and learn everything along the way as her daughter did. That way, it just makes sense, and she knows her daughter is being looked after. So if you are going to bring other people in, bring them in from the beginning. Don't let them secondhand quarterback you when they haven't seen everything you've looked at. Another home buying mistake that you want to avoid is changing your credit. So what do I mean? Don't go buy a new car. Don't go buy new furniture and put it on credit. Don't change anything on your credit when you are buying a house. And I'm sure you've heard that before. A lot of people will tell you that a good lender should advise you on that. You don't want to change anything on your credit. Basically, simple rule, don't give anyone your social security number besides the insurance person and your utilities. Obviously, the lender has to have it in the title company. But other than that, you do not want to give anyone your social security number because they're probably running your credit. You don't want to change anything on it, even increasing balances. So don't put an additional amount on a credit card and increase the balance. And you also don't want to pay any major debts off. Don't pay a car off. And I know you're probably thinking, what? You pay a car off, it could drop your credit. Now, it will adjust after a couple months, but you're in the middle of buying a house. You don't have a couple months to wait. So don't pay anything off without talking to your lender. Don't increase your credit without talking to your lender. Don't make any changes on your credit. Another big one that's sort of tied to credit, but it's more about your cash in the bank. You don't want to deplete any funds you have in the bank. So part of your pre-approval, a lot of times, they're looking at your reserve funds or how much do you have in savings, in a 401k, money that is sitting there in case you get into financial need. What are you going to do with that money? A lot of times people come to buy houses right after they get a tax refund, and they may get a pre-approval based on that tax refund being in the bank as reserves. And if they spend it, they may not qualify. And I recently had this happen. I represented the seller, and this young couple was buying their first house. They were so excited. It was in the neighborhood of their family members. I checked with the lender. We had a good pre-approval. And then all of a sudden, a week before closing, they didn't qualify. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. We got a good local pre-approval. I was protecting my seller. How do these people not qualify? So I called the lender and I'm like, what's going on? Well, I'm sorry, but they had their reserves in there from their tax refund and they have spent them down now. They have no reserve. Therefore, they don't qualify for the loan. So when I say don't change your credit, don't change your whole entire credit situation. Don't change how much money you have in the bank. Don't go spend a bunch. Don't make any big purchases. Also, another one that's become an issue here more recently, that this used to not be an issue years ago, are the systems like Venmo or Cash App or PayPal. You don't want to have any transactions that are deposits of cash, check, or Venmo or PayPal or Cash App, anything like that on your bank statement for a couple months leading up to the closing of a house or while you're going through the process. Now you're thinking, what do you mean I can't deposit a check? From your employer, it's fine. But if grandma gives you a birthday check for $1,000 or a wedding check, don't go deposit that without talking to your lender, because they may want to know where that came from. Now that's got to be documented, and you don't want to go ask grandma for her bank statements to prove where the money came from, right? So don't do that. Another one that I see is when couples live together and then they're buying a house and maybe they have separate bank accounts and they'll Venmo each other for money for the utilities or the rent, things like that, groceries. And that movement of money back and forth looks like cash deposits in your bank account. So be very, very cautious of that. Now, I do have some clients who they actually get paid through things like Venmo, and that's okay. You just want to talk to that lender upfront and make sure they're good with that and they're transparent on it and they can see that's how you're making money and it's actually treated as a business, not just you're getting cash from somewhere we don't know where it's coming from, because that will stop you from buying a house. And the last thing you want is you've already spent all this money on these home inspections, and now all of a sudden you got a Venmo deposit for $500 and they're questioning it, and you've wasted money because you now can't close on the house. So don't let that happen. Keep your credit in line and make sure you are very cautious on any transferring of money into your account or out of your account. So one mistake that I see happening with people moving from out of town into a new area is they want to ask the real estate agent a lot of times, hey, is this a good area? Well, because of Fair Housing Act and, real estate agents really trying to be ethical and follow the guidelines, they really can't tell you, hey, this is a bad neighborhood or this is a good neighborhood. So you want to drive through the neighborhood and make sure you're comfortable. Sometimes people will say to drive by at night and on the weekends. I think the big key is go check out the local grocery store, Walmart, Target, wherever you're going to be shopping. Go check that out. That is part of living there. You also want to make sure the grocery store is not way too far away. We do have some areas around here that it can take 15 minutes each way just to get to a grocery store. So you want to know how close those stores are and make sure they carry all the goods you want. I'll tell you a funny story about a couple I'm helping right now buy a house here in Pensacola. And their number one reason for moving here was to be closer to grocery stores to buy the food they like to eat. And I know that sounds crazy, but in talking to them, I was like, what? What do you mean? Well, they're moving from a very, very small coastal Florida town, and they follow a vegan diet and like to find certain quality products to put into their body that aren't available where they live. And that's a huge part of their life. So one of the big things with finding them a house was how close was it to a specific type of grocery store that provides more organic and natural food for a vegan diet. So make sure you check out the grocery store. Make sure it's going to provide the needs that you like and you want, because that's going to help you understand the neighborhood, especially if you're not from around the area. Okay, no matter what you do, you must have a home inspection. That is one of the biggest mistakes people make. They will go, well, I'm getting a VA loan. The VA is going to do their inspection. That VA inspection is more of an appraisal, and it is nothing compared to a home inspection. You want a full, detailed home inspection. And I don't care if it's a brand new house. Even new construction, we recommend doing a home inspection. Did you know on most new construction, we find about 12 to 14 items? How crazy is that? It's a brand new house. How does it have 12 to 14 items wrong? Well, builders are human. The people working on the house are human. And the county doesn't do the best inspections or the most detailed. So you want to have your own home inspection, and especially on new construction, because you're just going to require them to fix everything on it. But definitely do the home inspection, a termite inspection. If there is a septic, do a septic inspection. There are sometimes I've had customers say, well, I don't really need a home inspection because I'm going to flip the house. I'm going to totally gut it. Okay, I could see that. Why waste $600 when you're buying a couple $100,000 house? I don't know. $600, I think I'm going to do it. Even when we buy a house that we are going to completely flip, I'm at least going to do a termite inspection. And depending on the age of the house, I'm probably also going to do a home inspection. I really want to make sure what type of wiring and plumbing are there before I get in to start remodeling it. The last thing I want to do is get in and unexpectedly find out that the whole place has aluminum wiring or that the plumbing has to be redone in the whole house because it's not acceptable to insurance anymore. So I strongly recommend do not skip out on those inspections. They are absolutely essential, and that is a huge mistake you are going to make if you go to buy a house and do not have home inspections done. Another home buying mistake that many people make is thinking it is their forever home or forgetting about the resale value. So what am I talking about here? Well, it's my forever home. I'm going to live there forever. So I really don't care if it's going to be a great resale or if it's going to be a good investment. It's really about me staying there till the end of my days. Every time a couple tells me that, I sell the house within a year. It is like the curse. As soon as someone tells me it's their forever home, I'm never going to sell it, within a year, I end up selling that house. And we don't know what life holds, right? We don't know if one of our family members are going to get sick and need us, if something's going to happen to us or our spouse and we're going to need to move. You may get a great job promotion out of the area. You never know. So it's not your forever home. It's always an investment. So always look at it that way. And think about resale. So whenever you're looking at the house, of course, you're looking for what is going to fit your needs, but also put your hat on for resale. What is going to stop others from buying this house in the future? One thing that a lot of people like, but makes a bad resale move, is they will remodel a guest bath and take out the bathtub. That really limits your buyers. You always want to leave a bathtub in the guest bath. Now, your family may not need that, so you may be happy that there's a nice shower because you don't have kids at home or your kids are teenagers. Great, they can just take a shower. It's a lot nicer. But when you go to sell that house, that could be an issue. So just think about those resale things. What is going to stop someone from buying your house in the future? Because it's never your forever home. And not getting a survey can be a huge home buying mistake. Now, if you're financing, your lender is going to require you to have a survey, either one that has been done before with no structural changes, or you're going to have to get a new one. So if you're financing, this may not be a mistake you can make because they're not going to allow you to. But when you're paying cash for a house, it's very important to get a survey. And they can be very expensive depending on the size of the land. And when I say very expensive, I mean, we're talking $700 to a couple $1,000s. So in the scheme of things, not that expensive. But what a survey does is it actually gives you the legal description of the property you own. That is legally what you own. How important is that? Yes, we have addresses, but like vacant land sometimes doesn't actually have addresses. It has a parcel number and a legal description. That legal description is what you are buying. It's so important you know what you're buying. You also want to make sure that there has not been anything built on a property line. So there could be something on a property line that could stop you from reselling. And we call that an encroachment, when something has been built across a property line. And I'll tell you a funny story that happened to me. Buying my first house at 19, and I got a survey. I was smart. I got the survey. I was financing, so I had to. They made sure of it. But our property had about an acre of land, but it was all backyard. So normal subdivision size front yard, acre of land that's all backyard, and it's all wooded. Well, we wanted to clear part of the property and put a fence up. So as soon as we started doing that, we pulled a chalk line and realized that my neighbor's driveway was poured 6 foot onto my property. That's a big deal. And I knew I had to act quickly, or there's some rules in Florida that after so many years of it being used and allowed, they actually can own part of your property. And there's some rights they have there. So I knew I was up against a clock. So I needed to get this handled right away. Luckily, I was able to get it handled without going to court, but you don't want to have to deal with that. You could end up spending so much money and time in court fighting to be able to sell your property. And a survey is going to show you if you have any encroachments or anything like that. Now, the first thing I did was call my survey company because they messed up, and they immediately spray painted across their driveway showing where their property was actually poured on our property. But even with a survey, you can see how easy that mistake could happen. But make sure you have that survey, you know what you legally own, and you know there's no encroachments on the property. The last mistake I'm going to leave you with, which I think is a huge home buying mistake, is if you have a good agent, listen to them. Hopefully you've picked out a really good agent, you've interviewed them, you're comfortable with their communication, and you trust them. If they're guiding you towards something, listen to them. There is a reason. So there have been times where customers did not want to do what I recommended. And maybe it was a home inspection or not getting a survey or some of the things that we've talked about. There's a variety of things that it could be. If they're advising you against it, I would probably stay away from it. That's going to be super important. You hired them for their opinion and to trust them, so you probably want to make sure you do that. That's a big mistake. If your agent is telling you don't do it or do it, you probably should. Well, I hope you enjoyed these home buying mistakes. Hopefully you will not make them. If you know someone who's going to be purchasing a home soon, please feel free to share it with them. If you have a question about buying a home this episode or an idea for another episode, please DM me, Jessica Duncan, on Facebook, Instagram. Find me, send me a message, and I'd love to answer it, and we may just mention you on the show. All right, it's time for our home hack. So a home hack is something I give you each week. It can be a website, an app, a tool, just something to help your experience in home ownership, no matter what stage you're in, easier, more efficient, or just more enjoyable. Today, what I'm going to talk about, which totally relates to the mistakes you can make while buying a house, is how you can opt out of lenders calling you. So what am I talking about? When you have your credit pulled by a lender, the lender is not selling your information. They do not want you to go talk to any other lenders. I promise. They want you to go with them. But whenever your credit shows an inquiry with the credit bureau then turns around and sells your information. So now you start getting, especially if you got good credit, this is going to happen. I had a client, he started getting a call every single minute for about 3 hours the next day. It was awful. So we started telling all of our customers about this website. It is www.optoutprescreen.com. So optoutprescreen.com. And we'll put it in the link so that you can see it. But what you want to do is before you actually apply for your pre-approval and your credit to be able to buy a house, you want to go ahead and opt out. And it takes a couple days to go into effect. So maybe do it, a week or so ahead of time, or at least 3 or 4 days ahead of time. But what that's going to do is put you on a do not call list so that all these companies don't see your credit getting run for a mortgage and start blowing your phone up. Hope you enjoyed this home hack and this podcast. We'll see you next time on Jessica Duncan's Just My Opinion for Adulting Made Simple.